Hey everyone, great to see you. Let's go ahead and get started. Um, I know most of you, but for those I don't know, I'm Megan Janicki with ALA's Public Policy and Advocacy Office. This is our monthly Libraries Build Business community discussion. These are informal peer-to-peer conversations. We typically have a featured speaker come and share a little bit about what they're working on. Today we have Anna Lucas from the U.S. Small Business Administration. She'll introduce herself in a minute. Feel free to introduce yourself either by unmuting and saying hi or typing in the chat. I have some announcements today, and we'll have time for others to share announcements or updates. We'd love to hear what's going on in your program this fall, or any challenges or resources that you're working with. Yeah, so anyone want to say hi before I dive into announcements? People are introducing in the chat. Thank you. Nice to see everybody. Okay, let's get started. I have a few announcements. So, like I just said, this is a monthly community discussion. We have these every month. We have many of you probably saw this announcement on our Libraries Build Business Slack board. If you haven't joined Slack, let me know. I'll definitely send you the invite. You can get all of our updates there. And we have all of our past meetings. So if you've missed a past meeting, on our YouTube page, which I'll ask Jim to share with us in a minute. Yes, Aubrey, I will add you to the Slack in just a minute. So all of our past meetings we have on YouTube, so check that out there. Next month in October, our meeting got moved. So we're usually the second Thursday of every month. Next week or next month, it's October 19th, the third Thursday. And Toledo Lucas County will be our featured speakers that month. Zach is here today. So definitely come back and check that out and hear from them. We are always looking for other featured speakers or discussion leaders. So if you would like to talk at one of these meetings and have some dedicated time, please reach out to me. Let me know. I would love to have you. We have availability this fall. So definitely let me know. If you haven't used our communication toolkit yet, please check that out. That's a free resource that we launched earlier this year. It has a lot of great resources and talking points and templates that you can use and adapt with your library's branding to start conversations with a lot of different stakeholders. So the small business owners in your community, partners, elected leaders, and library staff. So definitely check that out. I will share the link in the chat as well once I'm done talking here. And then my final announcement, ALA Annual 2024 is in San Diego, California. So everybody wants to be there. There are just a couple of days left to submit a proposal. The proposals are due on Monday at the end of the day. So last year in 2023, we had a really great showing of business and entrepreneurship programs. There was some great collaboration from folks in this group. If you have a great idea for a program and you want to work together with somebody, you definitely reach out to me. I can help connect you. It would be great to have some more presence at the 2024 conference as well. So think about that. You still have enough time to get a proposal in, and there's a lot of great folks in this group to work together on a panel. So I definitely encourage you to do that, and I'm happy to help. I think that's it for me. Do others have announcements or any updates from their programs and libraries that they want to share with the group?
I have a quick announcement that I wanted to share. So I'm Zach from the Toledo Lucas County Public Library, and This week we grew our small team of 2 to a team of 3. So Lindsay Williams is joining me on the call today. She said hi in the chat. She's waving. So we're excited to grow a little bit here. And Lindsay comes with her own experience in the small business and nonprofit world. New to libraries though, so we're so excited to welcome her and have her join us.
I was just going to mention, I'm Stacy with Spokane County Library District in Eastern Washington, and this feels, I don't know if disingenuous is the right word, since I was like, yay, Small Business Saturday, rah, rah, but we're actually transitioning away from Small Business Saturday because we're not getting the participation in our communities that we've previously gotten. But we are planning to do something in May for National Small Business Week, and we're using our 4 Small Business Saturday communities as the starting point for that, and partnering with local businesses in each community to do programming with us. Like there's a yoga studio in one community that's going to do a intro to yoga, and there's a bike repair place in the other community that's going to do like how to change your bicycle tire, so that we can show those businesses some love, get the word out about them, support them with an honorarium from the library budget. And then we're going to do a different event involving customers where they can maybe fill out a form in the library. We're working out the details on this, but kind of tell us what their favorite community business, small business is and why. And then we'll draw prizes for those from those folks. So we're also hoping to do a component that's maybe workshops that are targeted for the needs, the support of the small business owners. So we might we're hoping to work with our SCORE chapter to do something specific just for those business owners, and probably on Zoom, and have it recorded and then be able to send it to those communities. But that's what we're planning. So if anybody's interested in talking to me about that, I'm happy to share my email in the chat.
And I'm Anne from the Gwinnett County Public Library, and Ron and I have some news to share. Ron, did you want to talk about it first? Okay. Well, first of all, Adam isn't here today. He's kind of our leader of our dynamic team for the New Start Entrepreneurship Incubator for formerly incarcerated individuals. And he is actually speaking at GPLS today at the Adult Palooza. And I think it's actually tomorrow he speaks, but he's really excited to promote this program. And we will start our 4th cohort in January, opening up applications in October. And Ron, did you want to mention the panel?
Sure. And what we expect to have is a really large turnout of applicants. Over the last 2 days, I had the opportunity to do a special presentation with the Georgia Department of Community Supervision, which I think is the new name for Parole and Probation Board. At any rate, I could tell you they were extremely excited about New Start. And it gave me the opportunity to also do a good orientation about it so they understand exactly what it consists of. Because sometimes we have applicants who they're not really interested in starting a business. They just have difficulty finding a job. That's a difference. We need them to really, really want to do this because it requires commitment. It requires a lot of work. You need to move at a pretty level pace. So we explain that, but if they're really interested, and we usually determine that through the interviews that Adam and I will do soon. And hopefully, especially, we can get some people who really want to do this. But it's the first thing they ask about when I did the presentation on all about library resources applicable to men and women returning from incarceration into the mainstream society. But I think we're going to have quite a few applicants. So we're going to have some great people for this.
And finally, we have a panel November 4th with 4 of our graduates of the program. And it's going to be a panel for frequently asked questions for new entrepreneurs. We're so excited that they are willing to be part of it and that their businesses are up and running. So that's all from us, I think.
Wow, that's great. I tell Adam we say good luck tomorrow if you talk to him. Anybody else? Okay, I think that might be everybody for now, but like I said before, feel free to jump in at any point. Anyone can unmute to ask a question or share about their program, or into the conversation at any point, either by unmuting or typing into the chat. So I will now introduce Anna Lucas from the U.S. Small Business Administration. Anna was introduced to us from Rachel Svoboda from the Laramie County Library System, I guess probably about a year ago now, Anna. It was really cool. Rachel's part of the Community Navigators program, which I think Anna's going to be talking a little bit about. And we connected, and Anna was like, "Oh, look, I have your book." And she had our Libraries That Build Business book on her desk. And so that was really cool. So she's a library fan, and she's going to tell you about some of the SBA resources and some of the different ways that we can connect with their work and their resources. So Anna, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Megan. And hello, everybody. Thank you for having me on your monthly meeting. I appreciate the time. And I'm just glad to be in such good company. I think, as Megan mentioned, just as a point of personal privilege, I grew up in Maryland. I've used the county library system there as a child. I now live in DC. I use the city library system here all the time. And I'm just, as a, professionally, but also personally, just appreciate the resource that libraries give to our communities, particularly in more underserved areas. And so I just thank you all for the work that you're doing day to day. It means a lot to me as a person living here in the city, but also as a person in my professional life, where there is actually a little bit of overlap, which, as Megan alluded to, I will share a little bit with you today. I'm going to share, I just have a couple of slides which I thought might just sort of help kind of ground the presentation, and then you can look at something other than my face the whole time. But as Megan said, hold on, let me make sure this is, okay. I think you can see that. Let me know if that's, okay, perfect. As Megan said, my name is Anna Lucas. I work here at the Small Business Administration based out of Washington, D.C. I am in the Office of Rural Affairs here in SBA. You all probably know a little bit about SBA either through your work directly or some of your colleagues who've been involved in the Community Navigators program, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. And as Megan mentioned, I had the pleasure of working with Rachel out of Cheyenne, Wyoming, and got a tour from their library system as part of her work with the Community Navigators program. But we are a federal agency. We are the only agency dedicated working specifically to help U.S. small businesses across the country. And we have a very simple mission, that is to help small businesses get started, to grow or expand their existing business, and even to recover from a natural disaster. Some of you might have heard, I think many of America heard about SBA through the COVID disaster. That was one thing in terms of, we have disaster assistance typically is meant for our physical disasters. So if there's like a hurricane or a tornado or a flood, just like FEMA, SBA has services and resources to help folks who are impacted by disasters. COVID was sort of, a lot of the programs are administered through SBA, and we considered that a disaster of kind of a different type, but still kind of the same idea, where we were giving low interest loans to small businesses who were impacted by the COVID disaster. So little known fact that SBA does have disaster assistance as well. But our main focus typically on the day-to-day is around counseling and training, which is anywhere from the person has an idea that they want to get started into a small business, or they have kind of a side business that they've just sort of been doing, for fun or on the weekends, and they want to scale it into something more, or they need help writing a business plan so that they can do the next big thing, which is what most small businesses are looking for, and that's access to capital, or in other words, access to money. Where can they get money to help either sign a lease or buy a food truck or whatever it might be that they're looking to do to scale their business. But that is really the number one thing that folks come to SBA for. And you all may or may not know, we also help with the government contracting piece. There are all the federal agencies across the country are typically contracting with other organizations. SBA's role is to try to help make sure that we get a small piece of that pie, at least, that are segmented for small businesses specifically, so that the federal dollars that are being injected into communities stay small and local, and that everyone can meet their goals while also helping raise up small businesses. And our job at SBA is to help connect those dots. So kind of a broad overview of what we are doing, what our mission is, and kind of why we exist. Quick overview of kind of this tiny map of the big country. SBA has offices and personnel in every state and territory in the US. We have at least one in every state with a total of 68 district offices. So that means some states have more than one. This is kind of where you all come in. You may or may not already know that there is probably in your backyard, or at least in your state boundary or city boundary if you're in DC, or territory boundary, there is a brick and mortar office that has SBA staff working and living in the community, whose job it is really to focus on outreach and help connect the right folks. We have split up our country into 10 regions. So each region has a set of states and they have staff. They all work together within the region, and then we work together as a collective and with ties to our headquarters office here in Washington, D.C. for all of our policies and initiatives that come down the pike. So this is kind of how we organize ourselves. Every agency does it slightly differently, but this is how we do it at SBA. The map is there available on our website. If you are interested, there's a link up top where you can type in your zip code and see where your closest SBA physical office might be. We do have folks, we're sort of in a hybrid environment right now, so folks that are in the states and working in our district offices are coming into the office several days a week and doing a lot of outreach and travel on the road. So even if you are in an area where there's not a district office down the street, there's a good chance that someone from the SBA will be doing some kind of outreach or some kind of travel at some point in your area, even in rural areas. So that's just a quick kind of overview. Many of you, someone already on the call mentioned SCORE, so I was very pleased. You may have seen me grinning widely because it's great to hear that you already are connected with what we call our resource partner network. So SBA, as a small business administration, we have quite a mission. We cannot do it alone. We love to talk about what we refer to as our ecosystem. And so SBA knows that we have some limitations in where we can be and what services we can provide and do well. And so one of the things we do is we work with a broad coalition, or as we like to call it, an ecosystem, which includes people like our resource partner network. Resource partners, you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, include the SBDC, which is the Small Business Development Center, a Women's Business Development Center, Veterans Business Development Center, the SCORE program, which is the Service Corps of Retired Entrepreneurs, and then lastly, our Community Navigator pilot program, which I'll talk about in just a second. But these are folks who are also across the country. There's 1,400 partner offices across the country nationwide that we work with at SBA. They are sort of partners with us in that they get funding directly from the SBA. They're not SBA employees per se, but they are sort of a grantee of ours. And their main focus typically is to work very hand in hand with small business owners or those who want to be. And so technical assistance, things like I mentioned earlier, like let's say someone walks in and says, I need a loan or I need money. How do I do that? Go to a bank. The bank says, give me your business plan. They don't have a business plan. One of these resource partners here, depending on where you are, and depending if you even to fall into one of these categories, for example, if you happen to be a veteran, we have specific resources designated for veterans. It doesn't mean that if you're not a veteran, you can't walk through the doors there, but we have some specific segmented resources specifically for the veteran community in terms of starting or expanding their small business. And so a lot of the technical assistance, we rely on our resource partners to provide our folks on the ground, and they do excellent work with clients to help start small businesses, to expand them, and then refer them out to wherever they need to be, depending on where they are in their small business journey. So SBA, we work with our resource partners quite a bit and rely on them and vice versa. Related to that, just quickly, this is a lot of words on the slide here, but I wanted you to know that one of the things that we care very much about at SBA is our equity action plan. And this is, just for background, a executive order that President Biden put into effect. It asks federal agencies to think about how they are specifically targeting and thinking about underserved communities and how our existing resources are being utilized or not utilized, and how we can better serve our underserved communities, which of course relies on, as I mentioned before, the outreach. A lot of what the SBA business office or SBA district offices do across the country is do a lot of outreach, making sure we connect entrepreneurs to what they need, even if that means their first visit is actually to a resource partner. They may come back to the SBA when they're ready, wherever they are in the step of their journey. We may refer them back out. We may send them to a bank that we work with. We may send them to a government contractor if that's what they're looking for, or if they're looking to expand overseas. Maybe they want to do some exporting work. We have resources for that as well. But specifically thinking about in our equity program, how underserved communities is a main focus of what we want to be doing, and how SBA is trying to take a look at how we do that better. One example of that is during the pandemic. I think folks probably know with programs like the PPP or the COVID EIDL, a lot of America learned about SBA that through those programs because they were one of the very few things eligible or available to eligible businesses at the time when things were getting shut down. Businesses were having to lay off staff and they weren't quite sure what was happening next. We did recognize that not everybody who was eligible was able to take advantage of some of those programs, and that's partly because we recognize that if you're in an underserved community, or if you are just in an area where you hadn't really needed emergency assistance before, because we've never seen anything like the pandemic, that unfortunately some people did not have access, mostly because they don't have like a strong banking relationship, or they're underbanked, or their bank wasn't responding to them in time and the funds were running out. And so we know that there's some gaps there that we saw very clearly during the COVID pandemic that still exist today. And so one of the things that SBA wants to do and is thinking about in a new holistic way is how to sort of fill those gaps. And maybe it's not SBA that can or should be in all of those places for various reasons. The federal government is not always the answer to everything, and certainly not maybe not the most trusted actor in certain places, and we are aware of that. And so one way to sort of take a bite at that apple is to work with existing groups and locations that are already working really hard and doing really good work and are trusted members of their community that we don't want to take away from, but we want to maybe help enhance or help support where it's working really well. So one way to do that, one arm of that, is something called our Community Navigator Pilot Program. 3 of your colleagues, at least, have been involved in this. You might know already a bit about it, so I won't talk a ton. But this was also something that Congress put together during the American Rescue Plan. I think I have a slide on this. Next. There it is. Okay. In 2021, the American Rescue Plan had a lot of pandemic assistance, including funding for what they called a Community Navigator Pilot Program. And Congress and federal government love a pilot program because it means they can put some money towards something, especially short term. They don't have to commit to anything if it doesn't end up working out. And it's a nice way to say, let's give this thing a try and see if there's changes we need to make along the way. So for example, the Congress put together this program and gave it to SBA and said, administer this. Essentially, it is a grant program, which allowed SBA to partner with organizations across the country doing good work already in their communities, well-respected. A lot of them are grassroots nonprofit groups that are already engaged in certain communities doing a lot of work that SBA could help fund to either enhance their work or maybe even give them the opportunity to extend work that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do if not for the funding. And so one thing that there was hundreds of applications for these programs. The SBA ended up funding 51 organizations. Some of those we call like our hub program. So they're like the person who got the organization that got the funding, and they sometimes had what we call a spoke model, where they work with other groups that they either are funding or contracting through to get very local. Part of what SBA wanted to do is make sure that we work with those groups to not only enhance what they're doing in terms of their access to small business, but that we're connecting with them with our resource partners, our district offices, if that's the right appropriate thing to do, or any other network. A lot of local economic development associations, local governments, all kinds of small localized things that the SBA wouldn't necessarily even have visibility on, and we know we may not even be the right folks in the case. So it was a 2-year pilot program, which is coming to its end this fall. The Congress has not put out their fiscal year 2024 budget, so we don't know if it's going to get extended and funded again, but that's kind of where we are right now. The idea was for the 2-year program to sunset in the fall of this year, and that's where we're coming up again. The president did have an extension in his budget, but Congress is the final say on this one, so we'll see what happens. But regardless, there's been a lot of great successes through this program, and even if it does not continue to get funded, SBA is very committed to extending some of these relationships and trying to help make sure we continue these connections so that we are serving all the small businesses in their communities. I mentioned Cheyenne, Wyoming, and Rachel, who helped give me an awesome tour. She's fantastic. They have a really great setup with a ton of great resources for small businesses there in Wyoming and Cheyenne specifically. And I know she was working with our district office there as well. But 2 more of your colleagues in Allen County, Indiana, and in Central Arkansas have also been recipients of Community Navigator resources and have been working with our local district offices to help be a resource as a library for small business. And I'm just personally super excited that libraries can be seen as a resource for not just what people probably come to mind at first, but also for our small business community. And really, you all are the ones who are very well respected and trusted in your communities. And I think it's as a small business owner or someone who's wanting to be or just has some questions, feeling safe and comfortable to walk into your space and ask those questions of you and your colleagues in a non-judgmental way, I think is, I know is happening. And I again, personally and professionally really appreciate that. We have, the barriers to entry is something that we're sensitive to. SBA has, we have our own offices with, federal buildings sometimes, and our resource partners even are sometimes located in university settings. And that can be sort of, a detriment to some folks if they're intimidated by that or don't know how to sort of navigate those areas. And so I think libraries make an obvious choice for a lot of this stuff. And we know you all are very busy doing all kinds of other things as librarians that are beyond maybe what's in the job description. So at least wanted to say thank you. And in those 3 instances that I know that we have officially partnered with you and your colleagues, just wanted to extend a thank you for that. I will stop there. I think we're probably, I don't know where we're at time. I have my full government name here in the email. This is my email address, so feel free, annamaria.lucas@sba.gov, to contact me if that's helpful. Megan also has my email address, and I think we'll be able to share these slides with you if that's helpful. But I will stop there and see if there's, happy to hang out if there's questions on the chat, or even if folks just want to come off mute, I'm more than happy to stick around. Megan, maybe you can help me if there's, I'm just looking in the chat.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Anna. Yes, if people have questions, like Anna said, feel free to just unmute and ask, or we can take questions in the chat as well. I will be posting the slides, and we'll have the recording, of course, as well too.
I am thrilled to see there are some folks who work with our SCORE chapters. Those are I think those are the real like boots on the ground, so to speak. a lot in our communities, and I'm happy to see that that's already happening. I meant to say earlier, Megan, if I might, the map that I showed you, that you can, if you go on our website, you can type in your zip code and see, it will give you the closest SBA district office to your region or to where your location, but also our closest resource partner, because they're a little bit one and the same, and the resource partners tend to be a lot more like hands-on technical assistance, and so that might, depending on what you are looking to do, if you want to partner with folks, or if you just want to reach out and say, we're doing an event and you want an SBA person there or a resource partner person there, that might be the easiest way to get in touch. I do know that our SBA offices, on the flip side, have worked with a number of libraries across the country for events like space, just like you all tend to have a nice conference rooms and things like that, and they're centrally located, and everybody happens to know where the local library is. So that's sometimes a really nice example of working together. So I think is Stacy, do you have a question? Go ahead.
I have a question, and it's related, I think, to one of Randy's questions in the chat, because our SCORE office is, they share space with the local SBA district office, and they haven't been fully reopened post-pandemic, if we can say post-pandemic. And I'm not 100% sure if it's hesitancy on the SCORE mentors, who granted are, in that higher risk population, a lot of them are older, retired, or if it's a legit, not legit, but like if there's a restriction because of restrictions on the Small Business Administration or some sort of federal level restriction.
Yeah,
and I
good
don't know if you
question.
know anything about that.
No, good question. I unfortunately can't speak to what all of the resource partners across the country are doing with One Voice, but I can say their SBA, at least on the federal side, is right now still in sort of a hybrid model. We are at the end of this month, as a whole, increasing our time in person to our offices, both at the headquarters level and in our district offices across the country. We do, because of the pandemic and having shifted to a lot of, at one point, all virtual, and then sort of slowly in a hybrid space, at least at the district office level, have really tried to make at least some coverage on a day-to-day basis to make sure that there's at least a person in their office throughout the week. There are some of our offices have very few staff in them, and if there's anyone traveling, that may be sometimes a challenge, but there should always be a way to contact someone, and especially if you're referring someone, like if you have a client that has a question that would be well serviced by a resource partner or a SBA district office staff, that there's a way to schedule an appointment, which I think prior to the pandemic was a lot easier to just walk in and expect someone to be there all the time. And since that's maybe less the case now, we are definitely encouraging, an email or a phone call. Folks are answering those even when they're working from home, and just try to schedule something in advance so that we're not having people show up and there's no one there.
Okay.
So that's a long way to say we are moving toward a more in-person presence, but it may look slightly different depending on where we are in the country, based on a number of factors.
Thank you very much. It looks like Randy's situation might be different, because our SCORE chapter still has physical space. They're just not in the office. And I think that some of the mentors are doing in-person one-on-one meetings, counseling, if that's what the client wants. But I know, like, I have not been able to get them to go back to in-person workshops, which I think that's 100% on the SCORE workshop. That's nothing to do with SBA. So I know Randy had some other questions, so I will be quiet and let someone else talk.
No worries. Good question. Then Randy, if you want to unmute and go ahead and ask.
Yeah, I was told by my SBA rep just before she went on break for a month that basically one of the main programs that the SBA has was not renewed, the 7A funding. So you no longer can go and get funding from SBA in the way that you used to the loans.
I had not heard that.
Okay.
There has been a pause on the 8A government contracting. Is that?
That might be what I may be misremembering it. It may be the 8A, because we were talking about going in, doing MWBE, which I think is called something different at the federal level, programming, because where we are, we're trying to go and get as many people MWBE certified as possible, because that's our audience. And they were saying, well, the program's on hold.
Yes.
You speak a
So
little to that.
sure. Yeah, we really do need better names for these programs, because 7A and 8A are two separate programs and they sound a lot alike. And I think really what they're referring to is like the, code in the statute that it is passed into law. But we don't have anything more creative than that. So, but yes, Randy, thank you for the question. There is a program under SBA for our government contracting that we call the 8A program. It's the number 8 and little letter A. And that is part of our government contracting. We have a whole department who is dedicated to that. Part of the 8A program is helping with small disadvantaged businesses get access to government contracts. And the short answer is that there is a lot of goals that a lot of different agencies have that want to partner with small businesses. SBA is working and has been for a long time to try to get small disadvantaged businesses access to some of these government contracts that they otherwise wouldn't be. SBA does what's called a certification program to certify that the business who says they're small and disadvantaged are that way. And so when a government contractor looks around to see who's able to do this job, they have a list from SBA in that area that says these are folks who you can choose from. There has been a recent court case that challenged that small disadvantaged business presumption, really. And instead of saying that SBA has been able to identify small disadvantaged businesses as such, that the business owner themselves have to prove that they are small and disadvantaged, which we are working with the court order to comply with. Essentially, we're asking small but disadvantaged businesses to come up with a narrative to describe more about why they would consider themselves as such. And we're trying to work through that process. The challenge here, though, is that there are a number of businesses who are in the process of getting contracts who are falling into that category of small and disadvantaged. Those contracts have all been sort of paused until we can work through the process and prove to the ability to the liking of the court that they can prove themselves as such. And in the meantime, we have stopped accepting brand new applications for the time being so that we can work through the folks that are like on the verge of getting a contract under that designation that otherwise wouldn't. And so anyway, that's a long way of saying it's a government contracting related concern. The SBA is working very hard and trying to get this figured out by the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th. And I know we're leaning on some of our resource partners to help accomplish that. But that's a huge lift that we're trying to do. Once we can figure out, I think the next step, those folks who can designate themselves as such and get lawyers to sign off on all that, I think we'll know more about next steps for reopening the program. But that is a late breaking thing. I hope that didn't confuse totally everybody, but it's a government contracting focused question. But thank you for bringing that. And if I didn't confuse you, let me know.
You didn't, and that clarifies enormously what we were trying to talk about doing an MWBE program that'd be at the federal level, because we are doing stuff that's at the city and the state. Yes, if you're in New York City, there are 3 levels that you can go and do MWBE. So that's super duper confusing, and the forms to be filled out are even more so. So knowing that one of them is not available right now allows us to focus on local markets. But hopefully it'll go and get back online sooner rather than later.
Yep. I think we will probably know more by the end of the fiscal year, because the crunch time is now just to get these folks through the approval system. And then once they can do that, they can get their government contracts in order. And then I think probably starting October 1, we'll have a fresher look at what happens next. And I think some of this is going to be dependent on what the lawyers say too. Way
Yeah.
above my pay grade.
Yeah, mine as well. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Sure, sure. Megan, sorry if I'm missing any questions in the chat, but feel free to.
No, I think so. I think that was everything from Randy, right? We've gotten a few shout outs for people's local chapters of
That's so
SCORE
nice.
and SBA, which is
Love to hear
great.
that.
Yeah, Katie says in Missouri that their local SBA branch manager is a huge library supporter and helped them tighten other relationships, which is really cool.
Wonderful.
Anne loves SCORE as well. I know we got some SCORE love earlier in the conversation as well. Carly, not to put you on the spot, but have you all connected with somebody from the local SBA and we're doing a virtual program or something?
Hi, yes, we had a series over the summer where we did 3 different classes on WOSB certification, the 8A program, and then the veteran-owned small business certification. So we kind of advertised it as a 3-part group, even though obviously only one might apply to a person, but they were great to work with. And they even helped us advertise. So they sent it out to their email list, and I know which one was it. It might have been, I forget, it might have been the 8A one, but we had like 40 people join overnight because they sent it out to their email list. And I was like, wow, this interest is a lot more than I expected. So they were great to work with. And I'm looking forward to doing those 3 classes again, just because there seemed like there was a lot of interest. So yeah, we had a good relationship.
Early, those were online, right?
Yeah, all 3 were virtual.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Great. Yeah, we do. That's a really good flag about the email list. The SBA district offices, and I'm sure the SCORE and resource partners have their own sort of cultivated list. And we try to, tailor our content specifically to those local communities. And so, and I'm sure they're eager to get good stuff to put in newsletters or other email blasts that they can kind of send out to their specific folks. And vice versa. Maybe there's an easy way for them to supply content to you if you guys are doing something similar. I know I get a newsletter from my library here in DC, probably on like a monthly basis. So I know it does exist, and you all are probably doing something similar. So glad to hear it. Thanks.
And I will add that my contact just sent me an email recently with all their events coming up in the next couple months. So they're all great events. So I'm just going to incrementally advertise them over as they get closer. But yeah, it's a good partnership just because the information can be really helpful for new entrepreneurs.
Great. Megan, I am seeing a question in the chat about charging for programming. Okay, someone already answered it for me. That's awesome. But yeah, I think that's the idea, is that all the SBA resources are free. Our resource partners, who tend to do the more like technical assistance, hands-on training for folks, all their resources are either free or a small cost. And that's really to try to make it as simple as possible for as many folks as possible to access their services. Those typically, and correct me if you have a different experience, but typically if there's something getting charged, it's like something that either happens virtually or in person, or like an event or something. But to walk through the doors and get some help and counseling is not, that is all free. That's open to anyone in the public. And we are very careful about not sharing folks' personal information when they walk through the door, and we're not collecting a ton of information, and we're not sharing that information with anybody. So there's a lot of privacy, which I know can be a concern for some folks, but we take that very seriously.
I was just going to add that in Spokane County, we've been working with our SCORE chapter for probably 10 years now. And this may be more for Randy, but hopefully other people will find this interesting. And I think Megan and Carly have heard this like 5 times now, but when we first started attending the SCORE meetings and learning what they could do, I would approach them about maybe doing a lunch and learn type workshop for our libraries. because a lot of the workshops that they were offering in person were anywhere from 2 or 3 hours to like an all-day workshop if it was something about like learning a payroll software or something. And those there would be any a charge between 20 and maybe 50 or 60 bucks. And it wasn't like a money-making venture for SCORE, but it was something to help with their administrative costs. So when I was talking to them, I said, we're not charging our patrons for programs that the library is sponsoring. However, I'm happy to talk with you about an honorarium. So because we were doing, and my whole sell to them was like, this would introduce a segment of the population who maybe doesn't know about SCORE and SCORE's resources. And it might be a way for you to generate some interest in recruiting more mentor members. And so we agreed on a price that I wanted to pay them a stipend or something, because we didn't know how many people were going to come to these in-person workshops, depending on the community, because we've got 10 locations and some of them are very rural. And so we paid them regardless and sort of built up an audience. And so that's just part of my programming budget. And I realize not everybody has a robust programming budget. I also realized in talking with other library systems around the state that I'm paying per program more to ours, which I'm happy to do because our SCORE chapter is amazing. But the amount I'm paying is more than some of my colleagues around the state were paying their respective chapters. So it was something I had revisited with them a couple of times. When we went to during the pandemic and they went online only, it took a little while for our chapter to start up again. Seattle got going right away. Spokane took longer, but when we kind of did the same format, and then recently, earlier this year, and we were doing the library, Zoom was hosting and everything. Our SCORE chapter asked if they could take over and use their own Zoom, and then they use their whole software, and then it pushes out to their list, like Anna was talking about. So we got like a huge bump in attendance, and they weren't all from our area, but we had a lot of people from our area too. So that maybe was more than you needed to know, Randy. But if you have other questions about that, I put my email in the chat. I'd be happy to talk with you about it more.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I know that there's a number of libraries that are in New York, and unfortunately, we're all sort of competing for SCORE's time. New York Public is taking precedence, which sort of makes sense, but it's just been, we thankfully have other SBA sponsored organizations that are women's business centers that are working with us on programming, but SCORE has been a real problem, and that even dates to before the pandemic. They're great counselors, don't get me wrong. And we used to go and have them physically here, which was amazing. But trying to go and get them to do programming now for us has been a challenge. But they do like to go and do programs using our space and charge their members to go and attend. So that's why I was wondering if anybody else was going through that, or is that unique to Brooklyn Public, where, they're getting 24 people and it's $60 a person. So, but that helps. If it's just us, then I know that it's a unique situation for us.
I'm not entirely sure it's just you, because like I said, our SCORE chapter was charging for in-person workshops, but again, I didn't think it was like their money-making scheme, because that's not, their mission. I think some of it was the cost, like to help defray administrative costs. And then sometimes they maybe would have a subject matter expert speaker who they were paying for as well. So, but that's really unfortunate about the New York situation. I'm sorry that you're dealing with that.
Well, and thank you, Stacy, for being creative about finding a way to still make it accessible for folks, because I know we don't want the cost to be a barrier, but that is, the resource partners are only partially funded by SBA, and that's
yeah. I will say
all.
huge shout out to our SCORE chapter, because they were one of the linchpins in our Libraries Build Business program. So we would not have been able to do our program with all the pandemic stuff without our local SCORE chapter.
I will pass it on. I'm glad to hear it.
Anybody else have questions or comments or experiences working with SBA or SCORE, SBDC, any of the others? or just comments generally.
Feedback also is welcome.
So
I might
have,
say,
go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead, Meg.
Oh, Carly, there you go.
Okay. I might say that if you tried to reach out to one of the organizations, SCORE or the SBDC in the past, and they weren't very responsive, and it's been a year or two, to maybe revisit the relationship, because I know when I first started in my position over 2 years ago, I was told that it was like a rocky relationship. They weren't very responsive. We didn't have too much of a relationship, but then I reached out, and this was 2 years later, and they were receptive. They were like excited to work with us. So I don't know if just newer people, I was in touch with different people, but I think it's worth reaching out again. And I know Kristen Linscott, who's on the call, had a situation where they weren't working with one of the organizations, but they reached out again. So I think sometimes after a little bit, it's worth revisiting. So
Yeah, I know some of our LVP folks know that really well. So see Stacy's comment. Yeah.
Is my mic working?
We can hear you.
Yeah, Kristen, if you were
Oh, you
talking,
can?
we couldn't
Okay.
hear you.
I just heard you at the end there, but
Is my mic working?
Yes.
It is? Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is Kristen, and thank you, Carly. Yes, it was our small business development center that we had not a great response from at the beginning, but we are starting to make headway there. And I just went to Dallas Startup Week was this week. So there was a program on the Community Navigator program, and some of the organizations there, and the Women's Business Center was there, but some of also the CDFIs. I mean, the funding is such an important issue. So I think it's great to be connected with all of them. So I agree with Carly. Our SCORE chapter has been absolutely fantastic, and they were responsive from the beginning, but it's only built and built and built. But you know, we did have a little rocky start with Small Business Development Center. So no, not that they weren't interested, but just didn't really see us, I don't think, as really a player. And now that as we've built more programming, I think that they are being more responsive now, because they know, you know, that we really are serving the public in a significant way.
And Janet says that it often depends on who is the president of the SCORE chapter. So, right, the relationship can definitely change.
Well, and that is maybe not intentionally, but that is good feedback for me to hear. As we are doing outreach and saying, like, this is an obvious partnership between small business and libraries, not just through the Community Navigators program, but in other ways. It is not lost on me that perhaps we could also talk to the resource partners and say, have you thought about your local library system as a good partner that, you know, especially if they're reaching out to you, but even if they're not.
I do think it was really interesting at this event that I was at, because they did talk about the importance of mentoring, but nobody at this program mentioned SCORE. And I was talking with some of the participants and said, hey, have you heard of SCORE? Did you know that? And some of them were like, ooh, I want to follow up with that. I had heard there was something, but I didn't know where to find them. So I was kind of surprised that our group didn't really, because the Dallas chapter is significant in size, and they've been very responsive to us. But anyway, I think that is very much, though, an important point. It's about relationships, and it depends on the people that you find and how you're working with them, the relationship you're building.
Good point.
I dropped a exit ticket link in the chat. So those are just our 30-second end of the meeting feedback form. You just a couple of questions to provide feedback or any suggestions for future meetings. So please take a second to fill that out. Don't forget about ALA Annual. The call for proposals is open until Monday. It'd be great to have some of you all in your work represented there. Let me know if you need any help with that. And yeah, thank you again to Anna for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will share her presentation and we'll also share the recording. So everyone will have that. And yes, thank you, Anna. Anna provided again her email. So if people wanted to reach out directly, now we know somebody at the SBA. So
Don't be a stranger. And yeah, thank you all for having me. I know you're very busy and doing all kinds, just from what I've seen librarians do in my own life. You're doing a lot, especially in this political climate. So thank you for all of what you're doing and for our communities, not just for small businesses, but for everybody who lives and works in your areas. And I appreciate all of you. And Megan, great to work with you again. So have me back anytime. And Jim, good to see you too. And let me know if there's anything I can do to be helpful. And thanks again for all you're doing.
Thanks so much, Anna. Thanks so much,
All right.
everyone, for being here. I'll leave the line open if anyone wants to chat, but otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care. Thank you.